She walked into the homeless shelter at 4:30 in the morning, her hands raw and bleeding from scrubbing industrial ovens that never seemed to get clean. 21 years old, no family, no identification, no memory of ever being loved. She didn't know that 15 miles away, in a mansion worth $3 million, her guardian was sleeping in silk sheets, paid for with money that was supposed to keep her safe. She didn't know that for 18 years, someone had been stealing her entire life, 1 month at a time. And she definitely didn't know that the man searching for her had just discovered the most devastating betrayal a family could ever imagine. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Robert Ashley built his fortune the old-fashioned way. Brick by brick, contract by contract, mistake by mistake. He started with a single construction crew in Detroit in 1987 and turned it into Ashley Development Corporation, one of the Midwest's most respected real estate firms. By 2003, he had developed shopping centers across Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. His personal net worth exceeded $40 million. But if you asked Robert what his greatest achievement was, he would never mention a building. He would show you a photo of his daughter, Jennifer. Jennifer Roman was different from other children born into wealth. While her private school classmates talked about summer homes in the Hamptons, Jennifer volunteered at women's shelters. While they planned debutante balls, she was studying to become a trauma counselor. She met Richard Campbell at a fundraiser for homeless youth in 2001. Richard worked 3 jobs, sending most of his paycheck to his mother who was battling cancer. He had no idea Jennifer came from money until their 5th date, when she finally admitted her last name was Ashley. Richard thought she was joking. They married in a small ceremony in 2002. Robert walked his daughter down the aisle, and for the first time in his life, he cried in front of other people. He had learned something that money couldn't teach. His daughter had found something more valuable than his entire empire, real purpose. But on March 14, 2004, a drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Woodward Avenue and 8 Mile Road. Jennifer was 7 months pregnant. The impact killed her instantly. The baby, a girl they had planned to name Laura, survived. Born premature, weighing just 3 pounds, 4 ounces, she spent 6 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. Robert stood by that incubator every single day, watching machines breathe for his granddaughter, the last living piece of his daughter. Richard was there too, but grief had broken something fundamental inside him. He couldn't look at the baby without seeing Jennifer's face. He couldn't touch her without feeling like he was betraying his wife's memory. The doctors said it was a normal trauma response. They said it would pass. It didn't. On April 29, 2004, Richard Campbell left the hospital at 11 p.m. and never came back. He left a note that Robert still keeps in his wallet, even though reading it tears him apart every time. I can't be the father she deserves. Every time I look at her, I see Jennifer dying. I see the accident. I see everything I couldn't protect. Tell Laura I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her mother more than my own life, and that's why I can't stay. You'll give her a better life than I ever could. Robert was 71 years old. He had built an empire, survived recessions, outlasted competitors, and buried his own wife 10 years earlier. But raising an infant? That was a different kind of impossible. Still, he tried. For 6 months, Robert hired nurses, rearranged his schedule, turned his home office into a nursery. He held Laura every night, singing the same lullabies he had sung to Jennifer 30 years before. But by October, reality set in. Robert was falling asleep during business meetings. He nearly dropped Laura down the stairs after going 48 hours without sleep. His doctor warned him that the stress was destroying his heart. He needed help, the kind of help that money could buy. That's when Shelley Bancroft appeared. She came highly recommended by Robert's attorney, Jason Blunt. Shelley had been a registered nurse for 12 years, and had recently started a small agency providing in-home care for elderly and infant clients. She had references from 3 families, a spotless background check, and a warm, grandmotherly demeanor that put Robert at ease immediately. She called him Mr. Ashley. She called the baby our little angel. She promised that Laura would grow up knowing she was loved, knowing her mother's story, knowing her grandfather's sacrifice. She made it sound so easy, so safe. On November 3rd, 2004, Robert signed the guardianship papers. Shelley Bancroft would have full legal custody of Laura Roman Ashley. Robert would fund everything, $10,000 per month, every month, until Laura turned 18. The money would cover private schools, music lessons, summer camps, college savings, everything a child could need. He had Jason draft the agreement carefully. Quarterly reports, annual home visits, photo updates every month. Robert wasn't just handing over his granddaughter. He was creating a system, a structure, a way to stay connected even though age and health meant he couldn't be there every day.
Shelley smiled when she signed the papers. She thanked Robert for trusting her. She promised she would treat Laura like her own daughter. And then she took the baby, cashed the first check, and began building a lie that would last for 18 years. For the first year, everything seemed perfect. Every month, Robert received photos of Laura. Birthday parties with other children. Christmas mornings with presents. School pictures showing a happy, healthy little girl. The reports from Shelley were detailed and warm, describing Laura's first words, her first steps, her favorite foods. Robert called every week, but Shelley gently explained that Laura was too young to talk on the phone, that it might confuse her, that it was better to let her grow up without the pressure of knowing about her grandfather's wealth. It made sense at the time. Robert trusted her. By year 3, Robert's health was declining rapidly. A heart attack in 2007 left him weak, and his doctors recommended he reduce stress. He scaled back the business, spent more time at home, relied more heavily on his lawyer Jason to handle the monthly payments to Shelley. The photo updates kept coming. Laura at age 5, learning to ride a bike. Laura at age 7, dressed as a princess for Halloween. Laura at age 9, holding a trophy from her school's spelling bee. Every image showed a child who was loved, cared for, thriving. Robert framed every single photo. He built a shrine in his study, a wall dedicated to the granddaughter he was helping raise from a distance. He never knew that every single photo was stolen. He never knew that Laura wasn't riding bikes or winning spelling bees. He never knew that while he was staring at those pictures, his granddaughter was locked in a basement, eating scraps, wearing donated clothes, and being told that her grandfather hated her so much he paid someone to make her disappear. Shelley Bancroft's real life looked nothing like the reports she sent to Robert Ashley. Within 6 months of taking custody of Laura, Shelley moved from her modest 2-bedroom apartment into a sprawling home in one of Detroit's most exclusive suburbs. The house had 5 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and a backyard with a swimming pool. It cost $23,000 a month to rent. Shelley paid cash, using Robert's checks. But Laura never swam in that pool. She never slept in those 5 bedrooms. She lived in the unfinished basement, on a cot next to the furnace, with a single bare bulb for light. Shelley had her own biological children, Billy Smith and Janet Swing, 12 and 14 years old when Laura arrived. They attended private schools, wore designer clothes, took piano lessons and tennis classes. They went on vacations to Florida every winter and spent summers at expensive camps. Every penny of luxury they enjoyed came from the $10,000 Robert sent every month, money meant for Laura. The children were told that Laura was a foster child whose family had abandoned her, a charity case their mother was helping out of kindness. They were instructed to never speak to Laura, never acknowledge her, never tell anyone she existed. And they obeyed, because Shelley Bancroft ruled her household with absolute control. Laura's childhood is difficult to describe without breaking down. She was fed once a day, usually leftovers or expired food from the pantry. She was not allowed upstairs during the day, only at night to use the bathroom or clean the kitchen after Shelley's children had gone to bed. She had no toys, no books, no television. She had no birthday parties, no holidays, no moments of joy. Shelley told her, repeatedly, that she was a burden, that her grandfather paid Shelley to hide her away because he blamed her for her mother's death, that she was lucky to even have a roof over her head. By age 7, Laura believed it. She believed she was worthless. She believed her grandfather hated her. She believed that the basement was what she deserved. Shelley was careful, meticulously careful. When social workers occasionally checked in during the first few years, Laura was coached to stay quiet, to hide, to pretend she didn't exist. Shelley told the social workers that Robert's payments were for her own children, that Laura was just a family friend's child she watched occasionally. The system, overwhelmed and understaffed, never dug deeper. And Robert, trusting the photos and reports, never suspected a thing. By the time Laura was 12 years old, the abuse had calcified into routine. She woke at 5 a.m., cleaned the house before Shelley's children woke up, ate whatever scraps were left, and spent the rest of the day in the basement. She taught herself to read using old newspapers Shelley threw away. She taught herself math by counting cracks in the concrete walls. She survived by disappearing inside her own mind, creating elaborate fantasies where she had a family who loved her, where her mother was still alive, where her grandfather wasn't a monster who paid someone to erase her. The photos Robert received were completely fabricated. Shelley used images of her own daughter Janet at similar ages, carefully cropping and editing them to avoid anyone recognizing the truth. She hired a woman named Brittany Timmer, a struggling actress, to pose as Laura in a few photos when Janet grew too old to pass for Robert's granddaughter. Brittany never met the real Laura. She had no idea she was part of a crime. She just cashed the $200 Shelley paid her and moved on with her life. For Robert, the illusion was perfect. He saw a happy child growing up in a stable home. He saw the result of his money being used properly. He saw what he wanted to see, because the alternative was too horrific to imagine. On her 18th birthday, Laura was told to pack her things. Shelley handed her a trash bag and told her she had 2 hours to leave. No ID, no social security card, no birth certificate, no proof she had ever existed. Shelley told her, "You're an adult now. My obligation is over. You're not my problem anymore." Laura asked where she was supposed to go. Shelley shrugged and said, "That's not my concern." Laura walked out of that house with nothing but the donated clothes on her back and 17 years of trauma carved into her soul. She had no family, no friends, no resources. She didn't even know her real last name. Shelley had told her she was Laura Smith, that her parents had died in a car accident, that she had no living relatives. Laura spent her first night of freedom sleeping on a park bench. She spent the next 3 years bouncing between shelters, working minimum wage jobs under the table because she had no legal identification, surviving on the kindness of strangers and the sheer force of will that kept her breathing. Meanwhile, Shelley continued to cash Robert's checks. Even after Laura was gone, even after the legal obligation ended, Shelley kept sending reports and photos, using old images, inventing stories. She reported that Laura had graduated high school with honors, that she was attending community college, that she was thriving. Robert sent an extra $5,000 for college expenses. Shelley used it to buy a new car. This went on for 3 more years. 3 years of stolen money. 3 years of lies. 3 years while Laura scrubbed toilets at a homeless shelter called Mercy House, sleeping in the same building where she worked, earning just enough to eat once a day. She had no idea that her grandfather existed. She had no idea that she came from wealth. She had no idea that she had been robbed of everything, not just money, but identity, family, hope. She only knew that she was alone, and that loneliness felt like it would never end. But the truth, as it always does, eventually came looking for her. And when it arrived, it would destroy Shelley Bancroft's carefully constructed empire of lies. By 2023, Robert Ashley was 89 years old and dying. Congestive heart failure, the doctors said. 6 months, maybe a year. He had made peace with death, but he had one final wish, to see his granddaughter before he died. He called Jason Blunt, his lawyer, and asked him to arrange a meeting. Jason seemed hesitant. He said that Laura was very busy with college, that it might take some time to coordinate. Robert said he didn't have time. He wanted to see her now. Jason promised to reach out to Shelley and set something up. But weeks passed and nothing happened. Jason kept making excuses. Laura was traveling. Laura was sick. Laura was studying for exams. Robert grew suspicious. For the first time in 18 years, he asked to speak to Laura directly. Jason said that wasn't possible, that Laura didn't want contact, that she had asked for privacy. That's when Robert knew something was wrong. He hired a private investigator named Dean Roses in March 2023. Dean was a former Detroit police detective who specialized in financial fraud and missing persons. Robert gave him everything: the guardianship papers, the bank records showing 18 years of payments, Shelley Bancroft's address, and the one photo he treasured most: Jennifer holding her newborn daughter in the hospital, taken 3 hours before she died. Dean started pulling threads. Within a week, he discovered that Shelley Bancroft owned a home worth $2.1 million, paid for entirely in cash in 2019. She drove a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon worth $180,000. Her 2 children, Billy and Janet, had both graduated from private universities with 0 student debt. Her son Billy had been gifted a condo in downtown Detroit worth $450,000 when he turned 25. Her daughter Janet owned a boutique clothing store that Shelley had financed with a $300,000 investment. Dean ran the numbers. Over 18 years, Robert had sent $2,160,000 in payments to Shelley. Every penny had gone into her accounts. Not a single dollar had been spent on Laura. But where was Laura? Dean searched for her using every database available: birth records, school enrollment, DMV records, tax returns. Nothing. No Laura Ashley. No Laura Roman. No Laura Campbell. It was as if she didn't exist. That's when Dean realized what had happened. Shelley had never registered Laura properly. She had never enrolled her in school. She had never obtained identification for her. She had kept Laura completely off the grid, ensuring that if anyone ever came looking, there would be no trail to follow. But Dean was patient. He started surveillance on Shelley's home, watching for any signs of a young woman matching Laura's age. He interviewed neighbors, asking about Shelley's family. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Laura Huber, who lived 2 houses down, mentioned something strange. She said that years ago, she had sometimes seen a little girl looking out of the basement window late at night, a girl who never played outside, who never seemed to go to school. Laura Huber thought it was odd, but she assumed it was a troubled relative, maybe a child with disabilities. She never reported it. Dean knew he was onto something, but the girl was gone now. The question was, where? He decided to search Detroit's homeless shelters, a long shot, but the only lead he had. It took him 3 weeks, visiting every shelter in the metro area, showing Jennifer's photo from the hospital, asking if anyone had seen a young woman who looked like her. On April 18, 2023, at 11 a.m., a caseworker at Mercy House, a shelter on the east side of Detroit, stopped him mid-sentence and said, "That's Laura." Dean felt his heart stop. He asked where she was. The caseworker said, "She's in the kitchen. She's been working here for 3 years. Best employee we've ever had." Dean walked through the shelter, past rows of cots, past walls covered in peeling paint, and found her. Laura was 21 years old, wearing a hairnet and industrial gloves, scrubbing a massive oven that looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in years. She was painfully thin, her hands scarred from years of rough work. But when she turned around, Dean saw Jennifer's face staring back at him. The same green eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same expression of fierce determination that Jennifer had worn when she fought for the people nobody else cared about. Dean introduced himself carefully. He told her he was looking for someone, that he had been hired by a man named Robert Ashley. Laura's face hardened. She said, "I don't know anyone named Robert Ashley." Dean showed her the photo of Jennifer holding her in the hospital. Laura stared at it for a long moment, her hands trembling. She said, "That's my mother. She died giving birth to me. My grandfather blamed me for it. He paid someone to make sure I never ruined his life. Dean's voice cracked when he spoke next. He said, "Laura, that's not true. Your grandfather has been looking for you. He thought you were safe. He thought you were happy. He's been sending money for you every single month for 18 years. Laura didn't believe him.
How could she?
She had spent her entire life being told she was worthless, that her family hated her, that she was a burden no one wanted. But Dean showed her the bank records. He showed her the guardianship papers. He showed her the reports Shelley had sent, describing a life Laura never lived. And slowly, painfully, Laura began to understand that she had been robbed of more than just money. She had been robbed of her entire childhood, her entire identity, her entire family. Dean asked if she wanted to meet Robert. Laura said yes, but she was terrified. What if he really did hate her? What if this was some elaborate trick? What if she didn't deserve a family after all? Dean promised her that Robert loved her, that he had been searching for her, that none of this was her fault. On April 22nd, 2023, Dean drove Laura to Robert's estate. She had never been in a neighborhood like this, where the houses had gates and the lawns looked like golf courses. She felt like an intruder, like she didn't belong. When they pulled up to Robert's house, she almost asked Dean to turn around. But then the front door opened, and an old man stepped out, moving slowly, using a cane for support. He looked at her, and his face crumpled. He dropped his cane and started crying, these deep, gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and broken inside him. Laura didn't move. She didn't know what to do. And then Robert said the words she had waited her entire life to hear. He said, "I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I should have protected you. I should have known. You're my granddaughter, and I failed you." That's when Laura started crying too. The police arrested Shelley Bancroft on May 3, 2023, at 6 a.m. She was charged with 18 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of identity theft, and 4 counts of child endangerment. Her children, Billy and Janet, were not charged, but they were required to testify. Both admitted they had known about Laura, that they had seen her living in the basement, that they had said nothing. Jason Blunt, Robert's lawyer, was also investigated. It turned out he had been receiving kickbacks from Shelley, 10% of every payment Robert made, in exchange for never questioning her reports. He was disbarred and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Shelley's defense was that she had provided Laura with food and shelter, that she had done nothing wrong. Her lawyer argued that the guardianship agreement didn't specify how the money should be spent, that Shelley had the discretion to use it as she saw fit. The prosecution brought in Laura to testify. Laura sat on the witness stand for 4 hours, describing her childhood in calm, measured words that made the jury cry. She described sleeping on a cot in the basement, eating scraps, being told she was hated. She described having no education, no identity, no proof she existed. She described being thrown out at 18 with nothing, not even a name, she could use to get a job. She described 3 years of homelessness, of wondering if she would survive another day. And then she looked directly at Shelley Bancroft and said, "You stole my childhood. You stole my family. You stole my entire life. But you didn't steal my future. I'm still here, and I'm going to make sure no one else suffers the way I did." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Shelley Bancroft guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison and ordered her to repay every penny she had stolen, plus interest. The total restitution came to $3.4 million. Shelley's house, her car, and all her assets were seized. Her children lost everything their mother had bought with stolen money.
But for Laura, the trial wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. For the first time in her life, someone had listened to her story and believed her. Someone had looked at her and seen a person worth fighting for. Robert was too sick to attend the trial, but he watched every day via video link from his hospital bed. When the verdict was read, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank God." He died 6 months later, on November 15, 2023, at the age of 90. Laura was with him. She held his hand as he took his last breath, and she told him she forgave him, that she understood he had been lied to, that she didn't blame him. Robert's final words were, "You're so much like your mother. She would be so proud of you." After Robert's death, Laura inherited his entire estate, $43 million. She used $5 million to start a foundation called the Jennifer Roman Foundation, dedicated to helping young adults who had aged out of the foster care system without identification or resources. She used another $2 million to fund legal reforms that required stricter oversight of guardianship arrangements. The rest she invested, living modestly, working as a counselor at Mercy House, the same shelter where Dean had found her. She said the money didn't define her. What defined her was the choice to help others, the same choice her mother had made, the same choice her father had made before grief broke him. Laura never became a billionaire in lifestyle, but she became something more valuable. She became a person who turned suffering into purpose, who transformed betrayal into justice, who proved that even the most stolen life could be reclaimed. This story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How many guardians are out there right now, exploiting the people they're supposed to protect? How many children are invisible, living in basements, told they're worthless, while money meant for them builds someone else's empire? And how do we, as a society, allow this to happen? Laura's story ended with justice, but how many others never get that ending? Let us know in the comments what you think should be done to prevent this kind of abuse. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because the first step to fixing a broken system is refusing to look away. If you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Thank you for watching.